Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Quran Roots sessions, which I've started in an effort to try and understand the roots of the Arabic language used in Quran. My name is Imran Gundiwal, and I've set up these wiziq sessions to share my research on the root words that are used in the Quran. Now, these sessions will be hosted every alternate Saturday starting on the 18th of February 2012. And these presentations have been made available on YouTube for those who are interested but can't attend the sessions. They are currently taking place at 1 p.m. or 1300 GMT, and updates on these sessions are available on the QuranRoots Facebook group, which can be accessed at the web address shown on the slide. Updates will also be available at Quranology Discussions Facebook group if you would like to see them there. Now, this is the first presentation and is an introduction to how I see Quran root processes working, and I want to make it clear that it is my personal understanding of how these processes work and is relatively unconventional. I want to make sure that this is clear, especially for those who are not familiar with Arabic, because it's something you really need to look into and look at the other opinions and things and alternatives that are out there. So please investigate the orthodox views, the not so orthodox views for yourself, and don't accept anything I say without investigating it. I will try to give as many references as possible in the coming weeks. The starting point is to consider what roots are and how they work in Arabic. Now, every Arabic word has a root. This is how the language has actually been constructed. And this root is usually considered to be made up of 3 letters in most cases. Further, the root is usually understood to represent a verb, so everything stems from the verb. You have a verb, and then nouns, adjectives, etc. come from there. But in my understanding, these roots constitute detailed processes rather than simple verbs. And these processes are made up either of smaller processes or individual actions. In this slide, you can see it just shows how this process works the way I understand it. Each of these processes on the left, A, B, and C, play important roles in making up an entire detailed process when they come together. So you've got A plus B plus C bringing about this entire process, and we'll look at it in the next slide to understand it better. Let's take the example of the Arabic word qara'a, which is usually understood as he recited. The word Quran comes from the same root and is usually translated as recital. The root letters of these words are the letters Qaf, Ra, and Hamza or Alif. Now, when we look at the meaning of this root process made up of these 3 letters, we find it is defined as bringing composite parts together in a protected environment to develop stage by stage until ready to be delivered as a productive whole. Now, this process may and probably is a little more detailed than just that, but I'm just trying to demonstrate a point here, and you'll see as we move along what I'm trying to demonstrate here. I hope, anyway. Let's look at this process in a little more detail. It can essentially be understood in terms of conception, development, and delivery. The easiest way to explain this would be in terms of the reproductive processes of conception, development, and delivery. Now, I won't go too much into detail regarding the processes of conception and delivery here, but I would like to take a closer look at the developmental process that takes place in the reproductive process. The images here show us how fetal development takes place, so at least shows us different stages of this development. The important thing to note here is that between each of these stages, things are coming together and developing throughout the term of the pregnancy. We can see composite parts coming together and developing stage by stage until the fetus is ready for delivery. We can also understand how this process came to refer to recital, because in recital the letters, words, and sounds are brought together through various processes and developed within our vocal and other systems within our body in such a way that we can deliver it in a comprehensible form. It must be stressed, though, that recital is a derived meaning and not the primary meaning of this root process. Now you may be asking, what does all of this have to do with roots and studying the Arabic of the Quran? Well, there are three things that I would like you to consider here. First of all, are these roots simple verbs or detailed processes? Just questions I'm throwing out there so that you can think and consider it. Secondly, do the individual letters within the root have functions and meanings themselves? And should the meaning of every word derived from a root be dependent on that root? And we'll discuss this in a little more detail as we move along through this session. So finally, as far as this session goes, let's look at each of these three things individually. My studies have indicated to me that the roots in Arabic are more indicative of complex processes as opposed to simple verbs. An example of this is the root of the word qara'a, which we described earlier. This leads to giving serious consideration to a detailed descriptive process as opposed to a simple verb, and also allows us to study the Quran in great depth rather than just skimming the surface. The great advantage is that the depth can be seen in a very simple manner once broken down. When we look at the individual letters that make up these root processes, it seems that the arrangement of the letters are not arbitrary, but purposeful as well. So if the letter lam is placed as the medial letter of a root, it may serve a specific function which could be different from when it is placed, say, at the beginning or the end of a root. And also, we've got to ask the question, are we to accept that God left the language of Quran to the mercy of man, in that the message is dictated by how people of a certain time used a particular language? If this is the case, then we today can have no certainty in how any particular word was used in that locked time frame, and I find this quite problematic. Another question we need to ask is the imperfect language of Arabs in any given time frame an effective tool for conveying a universal timeless message? Would God communicate truth via language that can be changed at the whim of people? Personally, I don't think so. But again, I'd like to stress that this is a personal opinion based on my personal criteria for how I judge something to be true or not. And again, please take the time to see what the other opinions are out there and how people generally see things. Finally, I would like to mention how I understand root dependency, or to what extent a derived word is dependent on its root process. As mentioned earlier, I think we should be looking at root processes rather than simple verbs, which I've spoken about. I also think that nouns, adjectives, etc. need to remain true to the root processes. True to those root processes they are derived from in a consistent manner. So in an English example, we could say the following. He runs, therefore he is a runner. When he runs in competition with other runners, he participates in a running race. But we wouldn't say this. He runs, therefore he is an electrician, and when he competes with other electricians, he participates in a bake-off, if you get my drift and what I'm saying. So that's just basically how I see things. It's just an introduction to what we'll be moving forward with. And I hope some of you will join us for these sessions. I'm very interested to get some input from other people. It's very helpful for me, and I look forward to it. In the next session, which will be taking place on Saturday the 17th of March at 1300 GMT, we will be looking at where this whole process started for me. I will be sharing how my study of the concept of Salah got me thinking about all of this. We will also be looking at all the Sad Lam roots that appear in Quran and what the common thread of meaning is in all of them, which will help us identify what Sad Lam means. And possibly in the session which follows, start looking at some of the roots that are used in the Quran where Lam is the medial letter. which will possibly help us identify what lam means when it appears as the medial or middle letter of a three-letter root. So I look forward to seeing some of you at the next session, inshallah, and thanks for taking the time to listen to us. Assalamu alaikum.